Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you with the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne. Coming up, as many people already know, the Biden administration has announced student loan forgiveness for up to $20,000, but some people aren't sure what steps to take next. A student loan expert and senior economist for LendingTree joined me to discuss all you need to know about student loan forgiveness. What must borrowers do to ensure their loans are forgiven? Then, for the second time in 5 years, Puerto Rico has been hit with a devastating hurricane. Hurricane Fiona has left the island once again with a loss of power, flooding, and many more serious damages. Joining me to discuss the current state of Puerto Rico is co-founder and chair of Diáspora X Puerto Rico. What are some essential items you can send to help Puerto Rico? After that, a new bill is being proposed that would ban tattoo discrimination by employers and landlords in New York City. Council member Shaun Abreu joins me to tell us more about this bill. How does having a tattoo affect you from getting a job or even an apartment? And finally, Pianists for Peace is a musical event taking place on Wednesday, October 12th at Bar 9 in the city. The event will help support the people of Ukraine. Co-host and two pianist artists joins me to tell us more about the event. How will Pianists for Peace help support the people of Ukraine? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. President Joe Biden announced plans to provide student loan debt relief to millions of Americans. This has been an ongoing fight for years, and while some progress has been made, many student debt forgiveness activists are expecting total cancellation. In addition to those expectations, many are now wondering who actually qualifies and what are the steps needed to receive that relief. Joining me for a discussion on what you need to know about student loan relief is Jacob Channel, Senior Economist for LendingTree. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, many of us know that Biden plans to forgive up to $10,000 to $20,000 in student debt. Can you explain who actually qualifies for this forgiveness?
Yeah, so generally speaking, the people who qualify for this forgiveness are individuals who earn $125,000 a year or less, or couples filing jointly who earn $250,000 less and have a publicly backed student loan. In other words, people outside of that income threshold, for example, somebody who makes $130,000 a year and has a private student loan, wouldn't qualify for this forgiveness. So I think based on the administration's count, that means there's somewhere around 40-some million people across the country who could potentially qualify for forgiveness.
Now, I think a key term is up to. I like to think about this also when I go shopping. It's like that up to is a very important term. How are they determining who will receive a full $10,000 or a full $20,000?
Sure. So pretty much everyone who falls into those categories that I mentioned before, i.e. makes an income within those certain requirements and who has a publicly backed student loan, should qualify for $10,000 worth of forgiveness. Now, the caveat is that number could go up to $20,000 of forgiveness, so an additional $10,000 of forgiveness, if the borrower qualified for and received a Pell Grant at some point during their collegiate career. So if you don't know if you got a Pell Grant, what you should really be doing right now is logging into studentaid.gov because that'll give you information on not only what kind of loans you took out, but also what kind of grants from the government you received, like Pell Grants.
And can you actually talk a little bit more about Pell Grants? Like, what are they, and why are they receiving that extra $10,000?
Yeah, so like the name implies, a Pell Grant is a grant. So it's not a loan, it's money that the government can give to you that you don't have to pay back and you can use it to pay for college. The reason why the administration is specifically targeting Pell Grant recipients is because, generally speaking, Pell Grants go to lower income families. I think that the average income for a family who has a Pell Grant recipient in it is somewhere around $60,000 or so dollars, so that'll vary from place to place. But nonetheless, what this is an attempt from the Biden administration to say, hey, look, we really want to target the student loan forgiveness to people who need it most, and often those are people who come from lower income families.
Now, can you briefly just talk about that for a little bit? Because I know you highlighted that, student loans for people in lower income areas, it may be more of a challenge. Can you briefly talk about that?
Yeah, so certainly, logically, I think, and if you come from a low income area, you are yourself a lower income earner, and you know what it's like to have to deal with, making student loan debt payments, especially in the face of something like high inflation, which we currently see. I think you know firsthand just how difficult it can be to deal with excess debt, like from a student loan. And I think that the Biden administration kind of had that in mind. So what they want to do is look at people who need this forgiveness the most. One of the common sort of critiques of this kind of forgiveness is that it's going to benefit wealthy people, but this seems like an attempt to make that not really the case. So if you do come from a lower income family, if you yourself own a lower income, and you received a Pell Grant in the past, then this is certainly a really good opportunity for you to get even more student loan forgiveness than what you might have otherwise received.
Now, on September 29th, it was announced that the Biden administration had made some changes on who qualifies for the one-time loan forgiveness. Could you clarify or just talk about what some of those changes were?
Yeah, so for the vast majority of borrowers, the changes that the Biden administration made probably aren't going to be a particularly big deal. In essence, what they did was they made two types of loans, the Perkins loan and the FFEL, or Federal Family Education Loan. They made those no longer eligible for a student loan forgiveness. Those are kind of unique loans in that they're technically private loans, but they may be owned by the federal government. The reason why, and the administration didn't come out and say this in this exact phrasing. However, the likely reason why this change came to be was because we're now seeing lawsuits from a handful of states saying that student loan debt forgiveness is unconstitutional, it's illegal, they're trying to stop it. And one of the arguments they're making is that it could negatively impact private loan issuers. So the federal government is trying to do everything it can to ensure that that line of logic doesn't go anywhere, and that federal and that private student loan issuers aren't going to be impacted by this blanket forgiveness from the federal government.
Wow, thank you so much for clarifying that because I kind of had no idea that like so many people or so many other people were against this for that reason.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add too is that I believe, and it could be a little bit off on this number, but I think only about fewer than 800,000 people are going to be directly impacted by this latest change when it comes to the Perkins loans or the FFEL loans. So that's certainly nothing to sneeze at. That's certainly a lot of people, and it is unfortunate for them that they'll no longer be included in this forgiveness. With that said, like I mentioned earlier, potentially tens of millions of people stand to benefit from student loan debt forgiveness. So, ultimately, this is one of those instances where the administration is really just trying to do everything it can to ensure that this is not caught up in court forever and a day, and that people actually do get the forgiveness that they were promised.
Now, will there be different requirements for graduate versus undergraduate loans?
So at the moment, it seems like there won't be, just so long as those loans are, again, direct loans from the federal government. They're not private loans. And the person who has those loans makes, if they're an individual, like I said earlier, $125,000 a year or less, or a couple filing jointly $250,000 less. It seems like all of your loans, just so long, again, as they're backed by the federal government, will be subject to this forgiveness. Now, the only caveat to add there is that this is an opt-in process. So do remember that for the vast majority of people, this forgiveness isn't going to be automatic, regardless of whether or not you've got a graduate or an undergraduate loan. So you will need to fill out the application for forgiveness. But even if you've got a lot of graduate loans and not a lot of undergraduate loans, you should still qualify.
So I'm really glad that you brought that up because that was one of my questions. I wanted to know, was it going to be like this automatic thing? And you mentioned that there is an application, is it out yet? Are people able to access it? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the application isn't out right this minute. The Biden administration said that it will come out in early October, so any day now, hopefully. Um, but so as a result, we do kind of have to keep our eyes peeled and just wait for official announcement from the Biden administration, from the Department of Education, so that we all know, when the application's out. And as soon as it comes out, I would encourage everyone to just try to fill it out and apply for it immediately. The Biden administration said that it's probably not going to be super labor intensive. They're trying to keep it relatively short. I know it's a pain to have to fill out these kind of forms, but when you could potentially get $10,000 or $20,000 worth of forgiveness out of it, I think it's worth it. To answer the other question about whether or not this will be automatic, and to talk a little bit more about that, initially there was some thought that people who are on income-driven repayment plans, because they already have their tax filing information, their income information on file with the Department of Education, there was some thought initially that they would automatically be given student loan forgiveness. However, like I said earlier, because we're now seeing some lawsuits regarding student loan forgiveness, and some people are saying that they don't want to be automatically enrolled, that they would be negatively impacted if they automatically receive student loan forgiveness, it seems like now that might not necessarily be the case. And certainly in either case, there will always be an opt-out option. So if you are in a position where you could qualify for student loan debt forgiveness, but you don't want it for some reason, then you can always opt out. So do remember that as we go forward.
Now, seeing that we're based in New York, I think it would be really interesting to talk about how the average amount of student loan debt can differ depending on location. Can you actually talk about what you found?
Yeah, so nationwide, the average student loan debt is somewhere around $36.6 thousand dollars per borrower. So almost 40 grand, give or take. Now in New York State, it's a little bit lower. It's probably, it's $35,638 per person. But New York State, as we all know, is a very big, very diverse state, certainly, geographically as well as economically. So for folks who live in New York City, any of its 5 boroughs, generally they might, be expected, or they might hold a little bit more student loan debt. So for example, in the Bronx, it's roughly on par with New York State, it's closer to $35,000. However, if you live in a place like Manhattan, it might be closer to $40,000. So certainly your student loan debt burden will vary from place to place. But, again, what's really important is that no matter where you are, for the most part, $10,000 to $20,000 worth of forgiveness is going to be a really significant part of your loan. Yes, there are some people who have 6 figures worth of student loan debt, who have a lot of student loan debt. But the reality is unfortunately, thankfully, most people don't have that amount of debt. And so potentially, even $10,000 worth of forgiveness could wipe out about a third of your loan, kind of just like that.
Now, can you just talk about why you think people should prepare to, deal with payments despite this forgiveness?
Yeah, so like we've been talking about, there's a finite amount of forgiveness that's being offered, that $10,000 to $20,000 figure. And like I just said, most people, for example, nationwide and also in New York State, have more than $20,000 worth of student loan debt. So as a result, there is a chance that even after this forgiveness, and this won't be the case for everyone, but for a lot of people, they'll have some money left over that they still owe. So right now, the student loan payment pause, which has been in effect since March 2020, is still in effect. However, that's set to expire on December 31st, 2022, so this year. And as a result, when January comes around, people will be expected to start making their payments again. So even if you have a smaller balance after you got forgiveness, there may still be some money left over and you will be expected to pay that money. And as a result, you should really start budgeting right now and saying to yourself, okay, let's say I get $10,000 in forgiveness, I'll have $20,000 left over, which means my payment will be $200 or $300 a month, and I'm going to budget for that accordingly. The last thing you want to do, especially after the holidays, is be caught off guard by a new bill from your student loan servicer saying, "Hey, guess what? You owe us money again." So just be wary, be vigilant of that, because, like I said, the last thing you want to do is be caught off guard by it.
All right, Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. Days before the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Maria, the island of Puerto Rico saw Hurricane Fiona, a Category 4 Atlantic hurricane that impacted several parts of the Caribbean. Natural disasters and a global pandemic continue to affect island residents, leaving many people without power and daily essentials. With a mission to promote the well-being, self-sufficiency, and empowerment of Puerto Rico, co-founder and chair of Diáspora ex Puerto Rico, Surey Miranda, joins me to discuss how you can support those affected by the hurricane. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Kibin. Thank you for having me.
Now, as I mentioned, a lot is going on in Puerto Rico. Can you just talk about how Hurricane Fiona is currently impacting island residents?
So, Hurricane Fiona has been is a hurricane that impacted areas that are inaccessible to some extent, the specifically central part of the island, the southern part of the island, and the western part of the island. So normally we see the impact of hurricanes on the eastern part of the island, but this time, what is central part of the island in terms of electricity, in terms of like access, specifically as you can see, yes, those images like demonstrate how areas have been impacted. It was not only by the wind, but specifically the rainfall, where we saw a lot of landslides. And the central part of the island, like the highlands of Puerto Rico, were affected by it the most.
Now, you recently went to Puerto Rico. Can you just talk about what you saw and, experienced?
So I went to Puerto Rico on September 28th. I went with the mission of delivering some goods, and a big shout out that I have to give is Councilmember Velasquez, who has been collecting items at her district office. Together with Councilmember Velasquez and other, we had also, or we have an Amazon wish list. We collected items and we wanted to make sure that those were delivered in a timely fashion. So I went there with the intention of making sure that those got to people. So what I saw, it was I think that the striking moment for me when my return. When I was boarding the plane, I went through Aguadilla, which is a regional airport, um, and honestly, I teared up because I saw there were about like 35 wheelchairs So it was sort of an indication of how specifically for seniors, for people with disabilities, the island is not equipped specifically to provide care for those. And I think that that was the most striking moment of me coming back and sort of realizing that even though we are trying to make our best for the island to have the resources to be able to be a safe place for our loved ones, is not necessarily there yet.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up because I do think that a lot of time when we talk about, these hurricanes and these natural disasters, we think about everyone as a whole, but we often tend to not think about maybe, people with disabilities or, people with different challenges. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I wanted to know, have you seen, some ways that it may have affected different communities, for example, lower income communities compared to communities that have more wealth?
So the organization that we have been working with, Stronger Than Maria, they have been working particularly with seniors and folks or individuals with disabilities. And the reason why we have partnered up with them is that we want to make sure that people are able to not only get assistance by getting a generator, etc. These are folks that actually need assistance making those items that we give them work. And yes, as you mentioned correctly, we are sometimes ignoring the fact that there's people that need additional assistance, and specifically seniors. As you probably know, Puerto Rico has a significant aging community, and specifically those are the ones that may need the most assistance, and may not necessarily have the ability to like probably provide for themselves and be able to procure that they're in a like in a condition or a situation where they can sort of support themselves. So that is something that I do gotta give it to you. It's something that struck me and reminded me of how why is that we need to do more because what we're doing is not enough.
Now, I understand that Puerto Rico is dealing with massive power outages. How is this affecting the lives of the people who live there?
So power outages and it's something that has altered the way that someone goes about their lives in every sense of the meaning. Because right now it has been normalized the fact that folks have to incorporate as part of their lives how to go about power outages. Specifically, folks that were impacted by Fiona are going to probably be like a month and a half without electricity. And these are individuals that need like electricity to go about their lives. Specifically, and this is something that we saw with Maria, that a lot of folks had to come here because they may have diabetes, that they need to keep their insulin refrigerated. So this is something that is affecting the lives of many people, and like it is hard to normalize something that is just a basic need for people anywhere and everywhere.
Now, you brought up Hurricane Maria. This came at a time when the island was still recovering from that hurricane that happened about 5 years ago. Can you talk about the effects of that?
So navigating Hurricane Fiona has been interesting because we have been the folks that have oriented us like to sort of navigate our response were folks that were impacted by Hurricane Maria, the folks that came to New York City and made New York City their home. They have been the ones that were on the receiving end back then for Maria, and specifically that's why we were very specific in terms of the supplies and items that we wanted to provide because navigating things is very difficult. And as we have been talking, like the infrastructure have not recovered yet. As yes, it has been 5 years, but we're not in a situation where we can say yes, our infrastructure, our power grid is in a position that can withstand a strong hurricane. Like Hurricane Fiona was a lot of like rainfall. Rainfall actually was the cause of like a lot of this power outages. So we're still in the peak of hurricane season. So how is that we can make sure that we can provide, or we can make sure that people have access to basic services when we are not there yet and the infrastructure has not recovered fully.
Now, after seeing the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, what are some concerns or fears that you have now that the island is dealing with Fiona?
My concern mostly is just and I love that our conversation went there. Folks with disabilities, senior individuals who may not necessarily have the ability to communicate, because it has, like, as we said, like, it has been a month and a half of Hurricane Fiona, and how is that we can continue to keep them connected? Because at the end of the day, they're isolated if they don't have ways to be connected. Because once you don't have electricity, how is that they can continue to communicate with their loved ones? Because they need power to charge their phones. They need to continue to communicate to individuals, and how is that they can share how their situation if there's no ability to keep them connected.
Now, in response to the hurricane, several local organizations are working to bring resources and support to the islands that were affected by this storm. Can you speak on the relief efforts you've seen taken by local organizations?
So there are different organizations, and they all it is that is something that is beautiful, because they all have taken different areas. Some of them are providing boxes with like hand items, and something to remember about Hurricane Fiona is that there are a lot of relief efforts coming from the northern part of the island. So specifically coming from the diaspora, if we want to call it that way, I want to make sure that we are allowing for folks in the island to be able to support each other. So that's why we have been very careful in terms of what is that we want to provide, because we want to make sure that those local efforts have the opportunity to specifically to be there. So we have in the southern part of the island, there has been a lot of like distributions, organizations that have been providing essential items. We have also been working in the eastern part of the island with Aprodeg. They have adopted a number of families and are providing them with meals. Are like this is like a resilience center, so they have been providing them with like charge for their phones, ice, and then is Stronger Than Maria on the western part of the island that has been doing these events that you already demonstrated in the like different photos that you have been sharing, where they have been having different events where people come. And also they go to specifically mostly seniors, and they clean up because the flooding is something that impacted the houses, and they have to obviously clean up and make sure that it's in a situation where people can live again safely.
Now, where can viewers go to find more information just about ways they can help or support if they choose to do so?
So I'm gonna give you the quickest. It is our website www.diasporaxpuertorico.org. Once again, www.diasporaxpuertorico.org. All that we're doing is using a place-based model where we provide logistical support and financial support to organizations that are the ones providing the assistance. So everything that people are contributing is going directly to the organizations supporting Puerto Rico. We also have a wish list that if people reach out or go to our website, all the items we have already delivered a good number of items. But if folks buy from the Amazon wish list, those are already going to the island. And if anyone, because I know that people may want to do their like some drives at their schools, etc. I encourage that, and I'm more than happy to support it, and to specifically make sure that things get to the island. So if anyone in the Bronx and anywhere in New York City wants to do a supply drive, specifically thinking of the items that we have identified, I'm more than happy to support it to make sure that that gets to Puerto Rico.
All right, Surey, thank you so much for bringing us this information.
Thank you, Kibin.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. A new bill banning tattoo discrimination could be coming to New York City. Councilmember Shaun Abreu announced Intro 702, a bill that would make it illegal for New Yorkers with tattoos to face discrimination at the hands of employers and landlords. So far, the bill has received support from council members Natasha Williams, Justin Brannan, and Kevin Riley. NYC Councilmember Shaun Abreu joins me now to discuss how this bill could change the lives of many New Yorkers. Councilmember Abreu, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about this bill and who it could protect?
Yeah, so this bill would ban discrimination on those who wear tattoos. And this would apply in the context of employment as well as housing opportunities. This would protect those who have tattoos and those who are expressing themselves artistically. We feel very strongly that your job is very important. If you're able to do the job, is very important. And if you have a tattoo, why should the employer care?
Right. And I think it's also pretty amazing. It's pretty much going to protect millions of New Yorkers because so many people have tattoos. Now, I want to know what inspired you to actually advocate for this. Just what gave you the idea that this should be, kind of made into a bill?
Well, we have a lot of constituents who have expressed anxieties over having tattoos when it comes to work, especially. And so it's something that sprung us to action. And we worked together with my legislative director to work on this bill. But the impetus for it came from one of my constituents who, feared that he was being discriminated for having a tattoo. But the anxiety is felt very broadly throughout the district.
Now, I think many of us know that tattoo discrimination is common for employers. It's honestly something that we're taught probably like in high school. But I was surprised that, landlords were also participating in this kind of discrimination. Can you talk more about how people are possibly being turned down for housing because of how they just look or how they decide to express themselves?
Yeah, and look, it's we hear it a lot in employment, but we've had about a case or two where folks also feel that as well in the context of housing. Uh, Whether you're applying for one or the other, housing or employment, the fact of the matter is that the biases and the discrimination still is very rampant. And who cares what tattoo you're wearing inside your home, right? Who cares if during the application process you're also sporting a tattoo? And basically, we're just trying to eliminate all forms of discrimination. And what's at the core of all of this is job security, it's housing security. And we're protecting jobs, we're protecting housing. And that is of fundamental importance.
Now, can you talk about, you did say that, the reason why you even wanted to push for this was because many of your constituents have talked about, having this anxiety. Can you just give us some examples of, maybe some ways people have been discriminated against because of how they decided to express or, appear to the world?
Yeah, I mean, just whether you have a sleeve on your left hand or your right arm, rather. These are things that employers pointed out, and in one specific instance, and that was what I found to be very problematic on the part of the employer. And so here we are introducing this bill, and it's been received with a lot of excitement. The reception is very positive, and we're just pushing forward.
Now, I also want to know, does this apply to maybe more like professional career paths or, people who are going to work in retail or restaurants? Are they also facing that same discrimination?
Yeah, right now, from what we could tell, it's pretty broad, not unique to a specific industry. But that is something we've observed, and we're hoping that really doesn't continue to exist, that discrimination, no matter what industry you're in. But that's something that we're examining very closely.
Now, people often have tricks to avoid discrimination during the interview process, But once they get the job or apartment, do you know if they face consequences if those tattoos are seen at the workplace?
In under this bill, so far it's very broad. In that whether it's at the hiring phase or at the phase of you signing a lease, or if it's during employment or during your living in an apartment unit, so far the protections would exist in both, and we find that to be very important to the bill for the protection to exist during employment and during your housing experience.
Now, people have very strong opinions about whether tattoos belong in the workplace. Do you think there will be any backlash from employers or landlords?
So far, the reception has been extremely positive. It's been I've been just stunned about the reception we've been receiving on this bill. Many folks feel heard right now, and so we're going to leverage that excitement to really counter whatever opposition we're facing. That being said, we're looking forward to the hearing process whenever we score that hearing, which we hope to be soon. And when we score that hearing, I'm sure all voices will be heard. And as lawmakers, we will rely on that information to execute on policy.
Now, with bills like the Crown Act, which was a bill aimed to end hair type discrimination in the workplace, more people are questioning what is considered professional. Are ideas about what is considered professional or just professionalism, do you think they're outdated in 2022?
I think they're outdated. I do think they're outdated. Um, whether you have, a butterfly tattoo, whether you have something that reminds you of your family who passed away, artistic expression comes in many forms, and we have to respect that and honor that, because at the end of the day, rather, you can't lose your job over some discrimination on one's artistic expression. And that for me is something that really sticks with me. And I want people, when people think about this bill, I want them to think, what does it matter if someone is wearing a tattoo if they can still do their job? What the biggest concern is for someone to lose their job, not be able to provide for their family because of the way they're expressing themselves to themselves. And that is something I want folks to think about.
Now, as I mentioned, there was the Crown Act that was meant to help people, with, tight, coily, natural hair. And because of that, a lot of people have also been saying that the ideas of professionalism are often steeped in racism and sometimes even classism, or maybe even ageism. Could you talk about that a little bit more and what you've seen and, whether you agree with that or not?
No, absolutely. There's been discrimination on natural hair, for instance. That's insane to me, beyond me, that it happens. But the way that the way folks get age as well as some discrimination we're seeing in the workplace is also rooted in what you just described. And we have to eliminate all forms of classes, versions of discrimination.
Now we're starting off with tattoos, but there are so many ways people like to express themselves, which can consist of dyed hair, piercings. Do you see this potentially extending to those other forms of self-expression?
Well, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here now. I definitely look. I support people wearing piercings in the workplace too, right? Again, I think that the basic protection here is the basic idea behind all of this is you should be able to keep your job. You shouldn't have to lose your job because you're wearing a tattoo or because you have a piercing, right? It's arbitrary. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. We're excited on focusing on the tattoos. I'm sure folks could argue that it could lead in that direction, but right now I'm focused on the tattoos.
Okay, got it. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, does this proposed bill consider any exceptions, or how do you guys plan to address that?
Yeah, so that's something that I will also want folks to understand is that we believe is also a balanced bill in that if you have say a swastika tattoo or some kind of hate speech, or something that is considered to be like extremely offensive, as determined by the Human Rights Commission, um, that will not be permissible behavior under the bill. But again, these are be decisions that will be made by the Human Rights Commission, not one that will be made by legislators. Human Rights Commission is made up of experts, and we believe that they're better equipped to make decisions as to what gives rise to a hate speech, what gives rise to offensive language.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I didn't think, of course, we're thinking of self-expression. I tend to think more positive things, but there may be cases like that. So I'm glad that you brought that up so people can know that there may be some exceptions in the event that, employers or landlords run into people with those types of tattoos. Now, how can people just learn more? I know it's very new, but how can people learn more about this?
Yeah, so right now we are working with organizations, and we're working with labor, unions, that is, to expand this message. So we build up a broad coalition. But folks can reach out to my office at any time to stay connected, right? They can reach out to me at my social media account, CM Shaun Abreu. They can reach out to our legislative director, Jaleesa Quigley. Her email is JQUIGLEY at council.gov. And that is something that will be very important to be involved within the legislative process, and so that we can keep you informed on the hearings. And if you're excited about this, write to us so that we can incorporate you into this process.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. 8 months ago, Ukraine saw an attack from the Russian military, and shortly after the invasion, people across the world rallied in support of the country. Responding to the humanitarian crisis facing Ukraine, the New York City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and several other organizations have sponsored #Pianos for Peace, a musical jam and fundraiser aimed at supporting those affected by the war. Joining me to discuss Pianos for Peace is a co-host of the musical jam, Gregory Tsougranis, and concert pianists Alex Pryodny and Anna Shelest. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Gregory, we're going to start with you. Can you just actually tell us, what is Pianos for Ukraine or #Pianos for Peace?
Okay, so what this is an event to shed some light on the war going on in the Ukraine. It might be far away from many people. However, what this is, a disastrous event which is affecting millions of lives. So because I'm on different boards and I have associations with different people, and I also was lucky enough to know Anna and some of the other pianists, I said, why don't we get some organizations together to shed some light on what's going on, the war, the horrors, so that people can be aware of it and people can help. So the 4 organizations are the New York City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Bronx School for Music, the American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association, which we call the HEPA, my Bronx chapter that I'm part of, and since I'm a realtor, also the National Association of Realtors. So it's 4 foundations of 4 pianists. They're advocating and raising funds for 4 worthy organizations.
Now, Alex and Anna, I know that you were both born in Ukraine, so I'm sure this hits very close to home. Anna, we'll start with you. Can you just talk about what's happening over in Ukraine right now?
Well, Ukraine is at war with its neighboring country. I was born in the city of Kharkiv. It's the 2nd largest city in Ukraine. It's very close to the Russian border. And our town is being shelled every day. You know, every day you can think there are terrorist attacks on the city, on civilians, on children, on people who just want to stay and live peacefully. I must say that this is the worst time of my life. I think for most Ukrainians, they can say the same. It doesn't matter where we live, whether we're in Ukraine or whether people are refugees now or Americans like myself. I did not feel any kind of physical discomfort from this war because I live in the United States, but I think it's emotional and just the horror of being worried for our families. It's really real. And I think with this event that we're going to have tomorrow, one of the maybe hopeful messages of it is that we'd like for people to associate Ukraine also with beautiful things, with music, with things that we can enjoy. So when this war is over, we can finally start seeing the beauty and peace that Ukraine can contribute to the world.
Now, Alex, prior to this interview, you mentioned that you have family displaced by the war. Can you talk about, just what's going on there and how it's affecting people, both, here or, people who have family members in Ukraine?
Yes. So I've been in the United States actually for quite some time, since 2001. But I have a lot of family that's still in Ukraine. We keep in touch. And I actually grew up, I was born in Kyiv, but I grew up in the eastern part, which is currently occupied. So for me, the war really started in 2014. When my city where I grew up became occupied, and I realized that I might never be able to go back to the place where I grew up in. Of course, since February, we just felt a sense of shock and sadness, and for a while we were almost frozen. We didn't know what to do, but I just realized that we need to use our talents. We need to use whatever voice we have to present a case for Ukraine in the world, to present some positive case, to present Ukrainian music and Ukrainian art and our culture, and show that we kind of deserve a place in the world, and that we refuse to be erased from the map. So I think that's what this event is about, in addition to raising money, which is of course also very important.
So the event will have 4 organizations that will, just support different areas or different needed areas that need support. Gregory, can you tell us about the 4 organizations that were highlighted, and what made them stand out and make an excellent fit for this event?
Okay, I totally believe in a grassroots up approach to everything. All right, this is just basically small people doing big things. So I told the artists, you know what, I'm not going to try to say you have to do, to do any kind of support for this organization or that organization. I said, pick an organization that you feel is doing the best for your people and for humanity. So the first one is Razom for Ukraine. I was told about what they do. One thing that they're doing is they're building bomb shelters for people who have bombs being rained on them. Then I did somewhat ask or put the Greek Orthodox Fund for Ukraine, because I am Greek Orthodox and I don't want this war being done in my name. And a lot of people don't know the whole politics of the region, but the Greek Orthodox Church, the second the war broke out, gave $100,000 from our archdiocese here in America, and they pledged $1 million. So this is our way of just getting, getting a little bit of support from not just Ukrainians, but the world structure, the world community out there, because it's not just about the Ukraine, it's about all of us also. The other organization is called Revived Soldiers for Ukraine, which just bought some medical equipment as well as ambulances. And then there's also the Ukraine Children's Action Fund, which basically is helping the children deal with the mental trauma of war. So these are all gold-rated not-for-profits picked by the pianists, the artists themselves. Each of them has websites, and if you go on our website, we built a landing page for this, you could learn more about it. But I encourage everyone. A big part of what we're doing today is not just supporting in terms of financial support, but also letting people understand who are the organizations that these artists who are affected by the war picked in order to best support boots on the ground efforts to help the children and also the adults.
Now, Alex and Anna, we know that you guys have both picked an organization. Can you quickly just tell us, what made that organization stand out to you or why you chose them? And Anna, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, for me, what was so incredibly moving during these months of the war is to see not only Ukrainians come together, but to see other communities, people who might never really took interest in Ukraine before this war. Suddenly, they really have such strong sense of being able, they want to help, and the fact that Gregory, who's my friend, he's Greek, and the Greek community has been so incredibly supportive of Ukraine. I thought it would be kind of a meaningful way for us to present this solidarity at this event, and for me to play for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America.
And Alex, can you quickly tell us just, why you chose the organization that you did?
Yes, my organization is called Razom for Ukraine. So the word Razom means together, it's together for Ukraine, and it's a wonderful organization that actually branches into a lot of directions. They help refugees directly. They are on the ground in Ukraine as well as here. And one of the important things they do is advocacy here in the United States and in Europe. They organize events and demonstrations, cultural events, and sometimes they speak directly with politicians who make those decisions. So, when we talk about things like helping Ukraine close the skies so that we are not getting bombed, the civilians are not getting bombed, it takes advocacy, it takes a real effort here. So, and Razom is one of the best organizations at kind of creating this narrative that we need to help Ukraine and we need to protect our people.
Now, I think this is a really amazing event, and I love that you mentioned that you want to highlight the culture as opposed to kind of spotlight the violence or some of the negativity that's happening. It's a moment to kind of celebrate Ukraine. Gregory, can you tell us how people can learn more about this event?
Sure. Can I tell the date and everything? Because it's basically tomorrow or Wednesday from 6 to 7. We have a mixer. Everyone is welcome. We have a landing page that you could go on and you could purchase a ticket beforehand. We do have a flyer up, I assume, but it's bar9newyork.com/pianos/for/peace.com. All right, and starting at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the pianists come up, talk about their organization that they want to support, and they'll play for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll end the night with basically education for the public so they can be aware, and also doing some good for humanity. Right? I don't know what else I could say. I do want to say that this is an international event. Please do support it by coming, by joining, calling up anyone that you want to invite, any elected officials to come down and speak to the pianists and the organizations, and just being aware more of our community and our global community.
All right. I want to thank you all so much for joining me to talk about this.
Thank you for having us.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
Do you have a second? So I just want to say that, you know what, it's up to us to take responsibility for our crazy world that we are in right now. And this is somewhat of a responsibility for all of us. We mentioned the Greek Orthodox Church and Greece. You know what, we would have never gained our freedom if it wasn't for the Panhellenes that came and helped us, which included people from all over the world. Even Haiti gave 25 boatloads of coffee to raise funds and to help us gain our freedom. So when people are struggling for freedom, this is a small opportunity to lend a helping hand to people fighting for themselves, to uplift themselves for freedom. That's my take on this.
All right. Once again, thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin, Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.